I didn't argue when they pushed that eviction notice across the table. I didn't plead, or shout, or threaten. I simply pulled out a yellowed piece of paper, worn thin from 90 years of history, and slid it across to them. A 1923 water rights deed. The room went quiet. Their smug grins faltered as they realized what it meant. 35 freshly built McMansions, worth millions, had just turned into accidental lakefront property. The Willowbrook Estates HOA thought they had won. They thought they could steal what wasn't theirs. But they had no idea what they had walked into, because the land they tried to take wasn't just dirt and grass. It wasn't just acreage on a map. It was my family's blood, sweat, and memory. And it came with something more powerful than any HOA bylaw or city zoning change. Came with gravity. But before I show you how everything unraveled, you need to know who I am. My name is Jake Morrison, 34 years old, former Army Corps of Engineers, 2 tours in Afghanistan, specializing in water infrastructure, and most importantly, the 3rd-generation owner of 47 acres of Texas soil, just outside Austin. My grandfather, everyone called him Pops, bought this land back in 1955, when Austin was still a dusty little college town and barbecue smoke hung thicker than office towers. He wasn't a rich man, but he was a proud one. The kind of man who believed land wasn't just something you owned, it was something you stewarded. In 1978, Pops built a dam on the back 40. Nothing fancy, just an earthen wall shaped with patience, a little help from the Corps, and a vision. Its purpose was simple: store water for cattle, keep the pastures green, and ensure downstream neighbors had enough during dry spells. That dam wasn't just dirt and concrete. It was a promise. As a kid, I grew up running those hills, hunting deer at dawn, fishing in the little pond the dam created. Pops would always say, "Jake, one day this land will be worth something. Maybe not in dollars, but in life, in water, in legacy." He was right, but I didn't realize how right until much later. Fast forward, 2 tours overseas. Afghanistan. My specialty was water. Wells, flow systems, irrigation under fire. If war teaches you anything, it's that clean water isn't a convenience. It's survival. People kill for it. People die for it. While I was overseas, Pops passed away. The land went into a trust under my sister Sarah. She lives in California, and she's good-hearted, but she doesn't know a damn thing about Texas property law. She hired a management company to pay taxes and take care of it. On paper, everything looked fine. Taxes were up to date. The land was managed. But what Sarah didn't realize was that land in Texas doesn't just sit idle without someone circling. If you aren't vigilant, someone else will find a way to take it. And someone did. When I got home in August 2023, I drove down that familiar gravel road, past the old oak where I carved my initials as a boy. I expected to see rolling pastures, the little pond glittering in the Texas sun, and Pop's dam standing steady as ever. Instead, I saw construction crews, concrete mixers, bulldozers, survey flags stabbing the earth like spears. My back 40, the land Pops built that dam on, looked like a battlefield already lost. The crunch of gravel under my boots felt different that day. Not like home, like trespass, like insult. I stormed up to the construction foreman, who barely looked up from his clipboard. "Sorry, man," he said, voice dripping with apathy. "Permits are all in order. This is Willowbrook Estates property now." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. I called the sheriff. Officer Martinez showed up, hat in hand, shame in his eyes. He explained what had happened. While I was deployed, the HOA filed an adverse possession claim. For those who don't know, that's an old law meant to stop land from sitting empty forever. If someone openly uses land for long enough, pays taxes, makes improvements, they can sometimes claim ownership. A law once meant to prevent waste has become a developer's favorite weapon. And that's how an HOA thought they could steal my grandfather's land while I was fighting overseas. That's when I met her. Maggie Thornwell, 52, president of the HOA, drove up in her spotless white BMW X7. Tennis visor perched like a crown. She had that smile, the kind Southerners perfect, where sugar coats every word even as they stab you in the ribs. "Your family abandoned this land, honey," she said, voice syrupy sweet. "We're just putting it to better use, for the community." Her words crawled under my skin. But what really set my blood boiling wasn't her tone. It wasn't her fake kindness. It was what I saw when I walked down to Pop's Dam. The water was dropping. Every single day, lower and lower. Because Maggie's crews had done something no one ever dared. They diverted the creek that fed it. 45 years of careful management, gone. My grandfather's promise to the land and to the neighbors downstream, dismantled for the sake of manicured lawns and decorative ponds. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about property. This was about war. The first mistake I made was hiring a lawyer. He smiled across the polished oak desk and quoted me $85,000, just to challenge the zoning change. 85 grand before even stepping foot in court. Meanwhile, Maggie's husband, Rick, yes, the city councilman, had already pushed through an emergency zoning modification. In my absence, our family's land had gone from agricultural to residential faster than you could say conflict of interest. That's when it hit me. This wasn't incompetence. This was strategy. A squeeze play. They thought I'd come home, overwhelmed and broke, and fold under the pressure. But I wasn't about to fold. See, Afghanistan taught me something. The devil always hides in the paperwork. So while my overpriced lawyer was filing motions that went nowhere, I was crawling through the county courthouse, digging like I was back in a war zone searching for IEDs. And then I found it. Pop's original dam permits from 1978. Signed, stamped, and co-signed by the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Those papers weren't just ink on yellowed pages. They were jurisdiction. Federal jurisdiction. And in that moment, adrenaline hit my veins like electricity. Because if the dam had been built under federal oversight, then no HOA, no city zoning board, not even Rick himself could override it. And fate wasn't finished with me yet. Buried even deeper in the records, I found something older. A 1923 water rights deed. My great-grandfather had purchased senior rights to the entire Willow Creek watershed. These rights were older than the city of Austin, older than the county's water district, older than every single McMansion Maggie had thrown up on my land. They weren't just trespassing on dirt. They were stealing my family's water. But Maggie wasn't the type to roll over. She doubled down. She staged a press conference, standing on her manicured lawn with a local news crew, tears in her eyes, voice trembling like some Hollywood performance. "We're just so concerned about our children's safety," she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "That dam looks unstable. We're worried it could burst at any moment." The camera panned to her cul-de-sac kingdom. Mothers clutching their kids like a flood was already on their doorstep. The funny thing about local news? They love drama, but they're allergic to research. If they'd bothered to check, they'd have found Pop's Dam had passed its last inspection without a single issue. But facts don't sell ads, fear does. Next came the harassment campaign. 3 HOA board members in matching polo shirts parked their golf carts at my property line every morning, scribbling notes like mall cops with a vendetta. They photographed visitors, wrote down license plates, and filed reports with the sheriff. Noise complaints every time I ran my tractor radio. Citations for unsightly structures, meaning my family's farmhouse that had stood since 1962. Reports about environmental hazards from my septic tank, which had passed inspection just months earlier. Then Rick pulled his dirtiest trick yet. Using his position on the council, he filed for a wellness check through Veteran Services. The claim that I was a troubled veteran struggling to adjust. So one afternoon, a polite but apologetic social worker knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, while Maggie sat in her golf cart down the road, watching like she was supervising a military drill. That was the moment I realized This wasn't harassment anymore. This was warfare. But here's the thing Maggie didn't count on. I know how to fight a war. While she was burying me in citations and propaganda, I was documenting everything. Trail cameras hidden in the treeline. Time-stamped photos of every diverted channel, every backhoe, every drop in the waterline. Flow measurements taken daily at 3 points along the creek. And then I made the most important call of my life to my old Army buddy, Tony Riggs. Tony now worked in EPA enforcement. 20 minutes on the phone, and Tony confirmed what I already suspected. Jake, he said, if they've redirected a natural waterway without federal permits, that's a Clean Water Act violation. And if your dam has federal jurisdiction, he didn't need to finish the sentence. That night, I sat on my porch, the smell of diesel exhaust from their construction crews mixing with cedar pollen in the humid Texas air. I watched floodlights cut across what used to be my back pasture, where concrete foundations now rose like tombstones. Every pour, every slab, every driveway, they were racing against me, trying to finish before I could shut them down. But war isn't about speed. It's about endurance. So I kept digging, and what I uncovered made my stomach twist. Willowbrook Estates had been built in what the Army Corps classified as a 100-year floodplain. Insurance companies had initially refused coverage. The only way the HOA secured loans was by promising flood mitigation, which, conveniently, meant permanently diverting Willow Creek away from their new homes and dumping the water onto my land. That wasn't just theft. That was fraud. Federal fraud. And then came the rumor campaign. Maggie spread whispers about my mental instability. She hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my deployments. She even organized a petition to have my farmhouse condemned as a public nuisance. But while she was busy painting me as a villain, I was building alliances. Mrs. Chun, whose family garden had dried to dust since the diversion. Miguel Santos, whose farm had been rezoned out of existence 2 years earlier by Rick's council votes. These weren't coincidences, they were victims. Victims of a systematic land grab. The deeper we dug, the uglier it became. 6 properties in 3 years, each absorbed the same way. Harassment, bureaucracy, and zoning sleight of hand. Always ending in Rick's construction company profiting. Always with Maggie smiling, visor tilted, perfume clouding the stench of corruption. The vibrations of heavy machinery rattled my farmhouse walls every morning. But to me, they were just reminders. Reminders of what I was fighting for. And every night, I'd go down to Pop's Dam, press my hand to the cool earth, and feel the weight of the reservoir behind it. Waiting, building, holding, because sooner or later, gravity always wins. The storm rolled in on a Thursday, the kind of Texas storm you feel in your bones before you see it. The air turned heavy, the sky greenish-black, and the horizon lit with veins of lightning. By dusk, the first fat drops were slamming against my tin roof like nails from a nail gun. I sat on the porch, boots propped, watching the rain sheet sideways across the fields. Every gutter filled, every ditch overflowed, and Willow Creek, what little was left of it, ran like a gutter through Maggie's precious subdivision. I knew what was coming. See, water doesn't forget where it's supposed to go. You can divert it, strangle it, bury it under culverts and pipes, but when the heavens open, it comes back with a vengeance. By midnight, the reservoir was rising. Pop's Dam groaned with the weight, spillway roaring like a freight train. I stood there in my raincoat, flashlight beam cutting through the downpour, watching the water climb inch by inch up the old markers he'd carved into the stone wall decades ago. Then I heard it, a low cracking sound, not from the dam, but from the culverts Maggie's contractors had jammed into the creek. They weren't designed to handle real water flow, and in that storm they didn't stand a chance. At 2:17 a.m., the first one gave. Concrete split like a soda can under a boot. A geyser of brown water exploded through the foundations of Willowbrook Estates. Retaining walls toppled. Backyards dissolved into mudslides. And in that chaos, The HOA's fantasy world cracked wide open. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just watched, rain dripping off the brim of my hat, knowing nature had finally delivered the verdict. But the flood was only half the battle. The next morning, while residents scrambled to bail out basements and Maggie's gardeners shoveled mulch into the street like it would stop a river, I made my move. Every photo, every timestamp, every flow measurement, every zoning violation, I dropped it all in a sealed envelope on the desk of the EPA's regional office, courtesy of my old buddy Tony. Within hours, federal investigators swarmed the site. Clipboards, hard hats, cameras flashing. And when they asked who was responsible for diverting the waterway, all fingers pointed the same direction. Maggie and Rick. The house of cards collapsed overnight. Rick's construction company was slapped with federal injunctions. His council seat was stripped under a corruption probe. Maggie, once the queen of her cul-de-sac, was reduced to pacing her lawn in rubber boots, screaming at news crews to turn the cameras off. But they didn't. They caught it all. Her tantrums, her excuses, her crocodile tears. Neighbors who once toasted champagne in her driveway now turned their backs. Willowbrook Estates was a half-built ghost town. Property values drowned under headlines of fraud and flooding. And me? I didn't gloat, didn't parade through the wreckage. I just walked down to Pop's Dam, ran my hand over the cool stone, and whispered, "We held, old man. We held." The farmhouse still stood. Mud on the porch, cedar shingles damp but sturdy. The creek flowed again, carving its rightful path through the land like it always had. And for the first time in months, I slept without keeping one eye open. Because the war was over. But not because I won. Because the land did. Water, dirt, gravity, they don't play politics. They don't bend to HOAs or city councils. They follow the oldest law there is, truth. And truth, like water, always finds its way home.